In 1929, Al Capone sat down to a spread of veal osso buco, homemade bread and cannoli so rich you had to eat it sitting down. But here's the twist. The Mafia didn't just eat to survive. They ate to send messages. Number 14 on this list is the exact dish Joe, the Boss Masseria, was eating when Lucky Luciano had him killed in 1931. And number 3? That was the secret meal cooked in every Five family's kitchen, only uncovered decades later when mob memoirs finally started getting published. These weren't just dinners. Deals got made. Hits got ordered. Wars started and ended over these plates. Before we start, hit that subscribe button because what you're about to learn is history they don't teach in school. Let's count down the 30 foods the Mafia actually ate while running the 1920s Underworld. Number 30. Hard Italian bread, what the old-timers called pana di casa. Every mob kitchen in Little Italy started the day with a loaf baked that morning, usually from a bakery run by a cousin or a family that owed somebody a favor. In 1924, a loaf at Parisi Bakery on Mott Street cost 5 cents and weighed nearly 2 pounds. The crust was thick enough to crack a tooth, the inside dense and chewy. Made boys tore chunks straight from the loaf at the table. No butter, no oil, just bread and a glass of homemade wine. Capone reportedly had fresh bread delivered daily to his Lexington Hotel suite in Chicago. Bakers who shorted the mob on loaves did not stay in business long. That simple bread was the foundation of every meal and every meeting. Number 29. The antipasto platter. Before any sit-down, before any business got discussed, the table had to be covered. Prosciutto sliced, paper-thin, sharp provolone aged for a year, roasted red peppers swimming in olive oil, marinated artichoke hearts, pepperoncini, anchovies curled around capers. At Nuova Villa Tamaro in Coney Island, where Masseria ate his last meal, the antipasto arrived on a platter big enough to cover 3 plates. In 1927, an antipasto for the table cost $2, which was a full day's wages for most working men. The Mafia ordered it without blinking. You did not start eating until the boss reached for a pepper first. That was the rule, and breaking it got you noticed in all the wrong ways. Number 28. Cured meats and aged cheeses. Every mob household had a cantina, a cold basement room where salamis and cheeses hung from the ceiling on ropes. Carlo Gambino's mother kept her own stash that hung for 6 months before a single slice was cut. Sopressata, capicola, mortadella, fresh mozzarella made that morning. Ricotta salata grated over everything. These weren't snacks, they were currency. A wheel of good pecorino romano cost nearly $4 in 1925, and it showed up at every baptism, wedding, and funeral. Families that produced their own meats and cheeses held serious social power. When Lucky Luciano wanted to impress a new capo, he sent over a whole salami wrapped in butcher paper. That package meant respect, and the recipient understood exactly what it cost. Minestrone, but not the thin stuff in a can today. Proper mob. Minestrone simmered for 4 hours in a pot the size of a car tire. Cannellini beans, kale, carrots, celery, potatoes, sometimes a Parmesan rind thrown in for depth. The secret was the sofritto, onions and garlic cooked in rendered pork fat until golden. In tenement kitchens from Mulberry Street to Brooklyn's Bath Beach, mothers fed entire crews from a single pot. A bowl sat in front of every soldier who walked through the door, no questions asked. The tradition came from Naples, where feeding anyone who entered your home was ancient law. Dutch Schultz, who was not Italian but understood the culture, paid an Italian cook in Manhattan $12 a week just to make his minestrone twice weekly. Number 26. Pasta e fagioli, which in every mob household sounded like pasta fazool. Ditalini pasta mixed with cannellini beans, tomato, and enough garlic to ward off the devil himself. This was poor man's food that the Mafia elevated into art. Joe Bonanno wrote in his autobiography that his mother served pasta fazool every Tuesday and Friday for 40 years without variation. It cost maybe 15 cents to feed a family of 8. The beans had to be cooked separately, the pasta added only at the last minute, or everything turned to mush. Mob wives judged each other's fazool mercilessly. Get it wrong, and word spread through the neighborhood in a day. Get it right, and you earned a reputation that lasted a lifetime. Simple ingredients, absolute precision, deadly consequences if you messed it up. Number 25, caponata. This Sicilian eggplant relish was sweet, sour, salty, and bitter all at once, making it the perfect appetizer for men who lived on every edge of life. Eggplant, celery, olives, capers, tomatoes, red wine vinegar, and sugar cooked down until the mixture turned almost jammy. It sat in every Sicilian mob household for weeks, getting better with each passing day. Spread on bread, served alongside cold meats, or eaten straight from the bowl with a spoon. Salvatore Maranzano, the boss of bosses, murdered in 1931, reportedly ate caponata at every meal, saying his mother's recipe from Castellammare del Golfo kept him young. A jar of properly made caponata was a serious gift. Bringing one to a sit-down showed respect for the host's Sicilian roots, and that kind of detail got remembered for decades. Number 24, arancini, the fried rice balls the size of baseballs, stuffed with ragu, peas, and melting mozzarella. These came straight from Palermo, and Sicilian families in New York and New Orleans guarded their recipes like cash. Making proper arancini took all day. The risotto had to cool overnight. The meat sauce simmered for 6 hours. The breadcrumbs had to be fresh. Mob wives shaped them in their palms while gossip flowed around the kitchen table. 2 arancini filled a grown man for hours, which made them the perfect food for long card games and longer negotiations. At social clubs on Elizabeth Street in 1926, arancini sold for a dime each and moved faster than the bakers could fry them. Eating one in a single bite marked you as an outsider who did not understand the ritual. Number 23, sfogliatelle, the shell-shaped pastry with hundreds of crisp layers filled with sweetened ricotta and candied orange peel. These Neapolitan marvels took expert hands to make. A single pastry could require 2 hours of work. Ferrara Bakery on Grand Street, open since 1892, supplied sfogliatelle to half the mafia families in Manhattan. In 1925, one pastry cost 15 cents, more than a full lunch at most diners. Capone had them shipped on ice to Chicago by train once a month. The layers had to shatter when you bit them, sending shards across your shirt and the tablecloth. That mess was the point. You could not eat a sfogliatella and stay clean, which meant everyone at the table was briefly equal. The boss got the same ricotta on his lapel as the lowest-made guy. Number 22, biscotti dipped in espresso. After dinner, after the dishes cleared, after the bottle of grappa appeared, the coffee came out. Thick, black, served in tiny cups that held 2 sips. The biscotti were made with almonds, baked twice until hard as rocks, and designed specifically for dunking. A single cup of espresso lasted an hour at a mob table, because the real conversation happened over that last cup. Umberto's Clam House on Mulberry Street served espresso so strong it actually kept men awake through 2 in the morning negotiations. In 1928, an espresso cost a nickel. A plate of biscotti cost a quarter. The moment the coffee arrived signaled business. If the boss poured yours first, you were in good standing. If you poured your own, something had gone wrong, and you didn't know it yet. Number 21, prosciutto di Parma wrapped around fresh cantaloupe. This summer appetizer looked simple, but the details mattered. The prosciutto had to be sliced paper thin, translucent enough to read a newspaper through. The melon had to be perfectly ripe, sweet enough to balance the salt of the cured ham. Real Parma prosciutto was technically illegal to import during Prohibition-era trade restrictions. so the good stuff came through the same smuggling routes as whiskey and wine. 1 pound of smuggled prosciutto cost almost $8 in 1927, roughly what a factory worker earned in a week. The mob served it at garden weddings in Brooklyn, where long tables stretched across backyards and neighbors came and went all day. That combination of salty ham and sweet fruit was pure Sicilian luxury, proof the family had arrived. Number 20, chicken cacciatore, hunter's chicken. Slow braised with tomatoes, mushrooms, olives, bell peppers, and a heavy pour of red wine. Every mob mother had her own version, and every version was declared the best by her sons. The dish originated with Italian hunters who cooked whatever game they caught in one pot over an open fire. Transplanted to New York tenements, it became Tuesday night comfort food. A whole chicken cost about 60 cents in 1924, which meant the dish fed 8 people for under $1. Frank Costello's mother supposedly made cacciatore so tender the meat fell off the bone at the sight of a fork. She served it over polenta or crusty bread to soak up the sauce. Nothing fancy, nothing flashy, but it was the food mob men actually craved when they were far from home. Number 19. Eggplant parmigiana. Layers of fried eggplant, tomato sauce, fresh mozzarella, and basil baked until the cheese bubbled and browned. This was peasant food elevated into a holy offering. The secret was salting the eggplant slices first to draw out bitterness, a step most home cooks skipped, but mob wives never did. Every Sunday table in Little Italy featured a tray the size of a newspaper. Albert Anastasia, the homicidal boss of Murder Incorporated, reportedly ordered eggplant parmigiana at Patsy's Italian restaurant in Manhattan the night before he ordered 3 hits. A serving cost 70 cents in 1929 at a good restaurant. At home, the same dish cost maybe 20 cents to make. Mob cooks understood the math perfectly, which is why the best versions always came out of kitchens on Mulberry Street, not from the dining rooms that tried to copy them. Number 18. Soppressata, the hard, spicy, pressed Italian salami made from the best cuts of pork. Families cured their own in basements, aging the sausages for 3 to 6 months until they turned dark red and firm. Each family guarded its recipe, adjusting the amounts of black pepper, red pepper flakes, garlic, and wine. A finished soppressata was pure muscle, dense and concentrated, meant to be sliced thin with a sharp knife. In 1926, a homemade soppressata weighed 2 pounds and represented about $12 worth of pork, plus 6 months of waiting. Cutting into a new soppressata was a small ceremony, often reserved for Easter or a christening. Gifting one to another family was a serious statement of alliance. Making a bad one was embarrassing enough to damage a family's social standing for years. Number 17. Bacala, salted cod that had to be soaked for 3 days before cooking. Fishmongers on Mott Street sold stiff, dried boards of the stuff that looked more like lumber than food. Once rehydrated, mob cooks transformed it into bacala alla livornese, stewed with tomatoes, capers, and olives, or fried crisp for Christmas Eve. The Feast of the 7 Fishes required bacala on every table, no exceptions. A pound cost about 20 cents in 1925, making it cheaper than most fresh fish. The long soaking process was the real investment. 3 days of changing the water every few hours showed dedication to tradition. During the Castellamarese War in 1930, the Maranzano faction famously held a Christmas Eve dinner, where bacala was the centerpiece. Served while Masseria's men ate across town, unaware that their boss had only 4 months to live. Number 16. Veal Parmigiana, the New World invention that became a mafia comfort food staple in every American Italian restaurant by 1925. A thin veal cutlet, pounded thin enough to see through, breaded, fried, topped with sauce and mozzarella, then baked until the cheese blistered. Real Italians in Italy thought the dish was an American bastardization, but Sicilian-American mobsters adopted it as their own. In Brooklyn, veal parmigiana at Bamonte's The old-school mob hangout opened in 1900, cost 90 cents in 1928, and came with a side of spaghetti. That was nearly a day's pay for an average worker, which meant ordering it signaled you had money. Bugsy Siegel supposedly ate veal parmigiana 3 times a week in his Brooklyn days, insisting the cutlet had to extend past the edges of the plate. Anything smaller, he sent back. Number 15. Braciole, thin slices of beef or pork rolled around a filling and simmered in Sunday sauce for hours. The filling varied by family, but usually included breadcrumbs, pine nuts, raisins, garlic, parsley, and grated cheese, all held together with a thin wrapping of prosciutto. The rolls were tied with butcher's twine and dropped into tomato sauce that had been simmering since dawn. 6 hours later, they emerged so tender a spoon could cut through them. Every mob Sunday table featured a platter of braciole alongside meatballs and sausages. The beef alone cost about 30 cents a pound in 1927, but the time investment made braciole a signature dish. Women who made them well were praised at the table. Women who made them poorly got quiet glances and no compliments. That kind of silent judgment carried serious weight in a culture where food was social hierarchy. Number 14. Lobster fra diavolo, the dish that killed Joe Masseria. On April 15, 1931, Masseria was eating lunch at Nuova Via Tamaro in Coney Island with Lucky Luciano when Luciano excused himself to use the bathroom. 4 gunmen, including Vito Genovese and Alberta Anastasia, walked in and shot Masseria dead at the table. The plate in front of him was lobster fra diavolo, lobster simmered in a spicy tomato sauce with chili flakes, garlic, and white wine. The dish got its name from the devil, Diavolo, because of the heat. Masseria, who weighed over 300 pounds and ate more than any boss before him, had ordered the family-style portion. The lobster cost about $4 in 1931. Absurd money during the Depression. Luciano walked out, Masseria hit the floor, and the Castellammarese War ended with 1 plate of seafood. Number 13. Clams Casino, the Rhode Island invention that spread through East Coast mob hangouts like wildfire. Fresh, little-neck clams on the half-shell, topped with bacon, bell peppers, breadcrumbs, and garlic. Broiled until the bacon crisped and the clams were barely cooked through. At Umberto's Clam House on Mulberry Street, a dozen casino clams cost $1 in 1928. They were finger food, designed to be eaten standing up at the bar or around a pool table. Crazy Joey Gallo ate Clams Casino at Umberto's the night he was killed in 1972, decades after the dish became standard mob fare. The combination of briny seafood, smoky pork, and sharp garlic was pure seaside Italian-American genius. Families from Calabria and Sicily who had never seen a clam before immigration adopted the dish as their own within a single generation. Number 12. Sausage and peppers, the street food of every Italian-American feast from 1910 onward. Italian fennel sausages, spicy or sweet, split and fried with bell peppers and onions until everything caramelized into a sweet, spicy, charred tangle, stuffed into a hero roll or piled over pasta. The Feast of San Gennaro on Mulberry Street, running every September since 1926, sold more sausage and peppers than any other food. In 1927, a sandwich cost 15 cents. Mob soldiers working the streets during feast week earned good money on the sausage carts, and every cart paid tribute up the chain. Al Capone's brother Ralph reportedly ran a sausage operation in Chicago that supplied half the Italian restaurants on the North Side. The dish was not fancy, but it was pure mafia economics. Cheap ingredients sold at volume, with protection built into every bun. Number 11. Italian wedding soup, which has nothing to do with weddings. The Italian name is minestra maritata, meaning married soup, referring to the marriage of meat and vegetables. Tiny meatballs the size of marbles, escarole or spinach, small pasta, all simmered in a rich chicken broth. Mob grandmothers from Campania served this at every christening and family gathering. Rolling the miniature meatballs was a job for children and teenagers who sat around the kitchen table forming hundreds at a time. A pot served 20 people for about 50 cents worth of ingredients in 1925. The broth had to be clear, the meatballs perfectly round, the greens tender but not mushy. 3 generations of women and mob families perfected this soup, and tasting a bowl from a new bride told her husband's mother everything she needed to know about the girl. Number 10. Calzones, the folded pizzas stuffed with ricotta, mozzarella, ham, and sausage. Brought to America by Neapolitan immigrants, calzones became the handheld meal of every mob social club in the 1920s. Lombardi's Pizza on Spring Street, considered America's first pizzeria, opened in 1905 and served calzones almost immediately. At 15 cents each in 1926, calzones were real working man food, portable enough for a crew on a job and filling enough to skip a proper sit-down meal. The dough had to be thin but strong, the filling plentiful but not leaking, and the bake even on both sides. Al Capone reportedly favored calzones at Mama Leone's in Manhattan during his New York years before moving to Chicago. He liked the way he could eat and talk without getting sauce on his suit, which he spent more on than most families earned in a year. Number 9. Pizza, but not the delivery kind, you know. Real wood-fired Neapolitan pizza with a blistered crust, fresh tomato, buffalo mozzarella, and basil. Lombardi's fired their oven with coal that burned at over 800 degrees, cooking a pie in under 2 minutes. A whole pizza cost a nickel in 1920. Mob kids grew up on it. They ate it for lunch every day and considered it as ordinary as bread. The round pizza was not fancy American food then. It was street food, immigrant food, survival food. Only after the 1920s did it start moving uptown. Frank Costello, who lived well and dressed better, kept a Lombardi's pie on his desk most afternoons. When he was ordered to testify before Congress in 1951, he reportedly ate a whole pie the night before to calm his nerves, washing it down with homemade red wine. Number 8. Osso buco alla Milanese. Braised veal shanks cooked in white wine, broth, and vegetables, topped with gremolata, that sharp mix of lemon zest, garlic, and parsley. The marrow in the bone was the real prize, scooped out with a tiny spoon called a marrow spoon. This was northern Italian food, which most Sicilian mob families initially rejected as foreign. But by the late 1920s, as the mafia climbed in wealth and status, osso buco became the dish you ordered to prove you had refined taste. A serving at a Manhattan white tablecloth restaurant cost $2 in 1928, which was insane money. Carlo Gambino, who ran the Gambino family for decades, famously preferred ossobuco to any other meat dish. He ate it slowly, worked the marrow with precision, and used the meal itself to demonstrate the patience that made him boss. Number 7. Risotto alla Milanese. Saffron rice cooked in broth until creamy, finished with butter and Parmigiano Reggiano. The rice had to be stirred constantly for 20 minutes, adding broth 1 ladle at a time. Saffron cost more than gold by weight, which made this dish a genuine luxury. A pinch of real Spanish saffron ran about $3 in 1926, enough to season risotto for 4. Mob restaurants in the financial district served risotto to bankers and politicians as a way of demonstrating the family's legitimate business front. Meyer Lansky, the financial brain of the early mafia, reportedly loved risotto alla Milanese and insisted his chef at his Florida home make it from scratch twice a week. He considered the discipline required to cook proper risotto, the constant attention, the refusal to cut corners, a metaphor for running a successful criminal enterprise. Number 6. Linguine with white clam sauce. Fresh little neck or manila clams, garlic, white wine, parsley, olive oil, and red pepper flakes, tossed with al dente linguine and eaten immediately. No cheese, ever. Putting cheese on seafood pasta was grounds for exile from any proper Italian table. The dish originated in Naples and traveled with immigrants to New York, where waters rich in clams made it affordable. A pound of clams cost about 20 cents in 1925. Joe DiMaggio's father, a fisherman who knew many of the San Francisco Italian-American crime figures, supplied clams to Italian restaurants all over the Bay Area. Lucky Luciano, despite his famously plain food preferences during his later exile years, loved linguine with clam sauce. He ate it his last night of freedom in the United States before being deported to Italy in 1946, reportedly finishing the whole bowl in silence. Number 5. Zeppoli, the fried dough balls dusted with powdered sugar that sold at every Italian street festival from 1910 onward. Pieces of yeast dough were dropped into hot oil until golden and puffed, then tossed in sugar and served hot. On the Feast of St. Joseph, every March 19th, Zeppoli ruled the streets of Little Italy. A bag of 6 cost 10 cents in 1928. Mob families operated Zeppoli carts as legitimate business cover, and the cash-heavy transactions made them perfect for laundering small amounts of money from other operations. The smell of frying dough and hot sugar carried for blocks. Children lined up. Priests blessed them from the church steps. Behind the scenes, the men running the carts were often soldiers, earning their way up, learning to handle money, inventory, and the neighborhood politics that would define their futures in the organization. Italian ricotta. Cheesecake was dense, rich, and lightly sweet, flavored with lemon zest and sometimes candied orange peel. Unlike the American cream cheese version, Italian ricotta cheesecake was lower and denser, more like a savory custard than a dessert. Every Sicilian family had a version, and every version differed in the small details. Veniero's Pasticceria on East 11th Street, opened since 1894, became the unofficial bakery of the New York Mafia. A whole cheesecake cost about $1 in 1927, more than most working families spent on food in a day. At christenings and weddings, the cheesecake came out at the end, sliced thin and served with strong coffee. Frank Costello's wife supposedly made the best ricotta cheesecake in the 5 families, and requests for her recipe came from women who outranked her socially, but knew better than to ask twice. Number 3. Sunday gravy, sometimes called Sunday sauce. This was the sacred meal of every mafia family, the weekly ritual that bound blood relatives and brought men together at the same table. The gravy started at dawn with olive oil, garlic, and onions. Then came pork ribs, sausages, meatballs, braciole, and sometimes veal, all browned and added to a massive pot of crushed San Marzano tomatoes. The whole thing simmered for 6 to 8 hours, the meat slowly surrendering its flavor to the sauce slowly transforming the meat. By early afternoon, the smell had taken over the entire apartment building. By 3 o'clock, the family gathered. Pasta came first, dressed with the gravy. Then the meats arrived on platters. In Joe Bonanno's memoir, published decades after the classic era, he wrote that no serious business was ever conducted at Sunday dinner. Sunday was family. Sunday was peace. Sunday was the one day the violence stopped. In that pot of bubbling red sauce lived everything the Mafia claimed to be about: family, tradition, discipline, and the slow, patient work that turned humble ingredients into something worth killing for. Number 2. Meatballs. Not Swedish meatballs, not Turkish kofta. These are Italian-American meatballs, the size of tennis balls, made from a mix of beef, pork, and veal, bound with breadcrumbs soaked in milk, eggs, parsley, garlic, and grated cheese. The key was the milk-soaked bread, which kept them tender through hours of simmering in Sunday gravy. Every mob kitchen had a slightly different ratio, a secret handed down through the maternal line for generations. The meatballs had to hold their shape, but yield to a fork, absorb the flavor of the sauce, while keeping their own identity. At RAO's, the legendary Italian restaurant in East Harlem that opened in 1896 and still operates today, the meatballs became famous enough that celebrities and mobsters alike waited weeks for a reservation. The recipe, closely guarded, produced meatballs that became the standard by which all others were judged. A plate of 3 cost 60 cents in 1929, and people paid without complaint. Number 1. Cannoli, the undisputed king of mafia food, the pastry that closed every meal, sealed every deal, and got immortalized forever by the line, "Leave the gun, take the cannoli." Crisp, fried shells rolled around a filling of sweetened ricotta, sometimes studded with chocolate chips or candied citron and dusted with powdered sugar. The shells had to be filled at the last possible moment, or they went soggy. The ricotta had to be the freshest available, often drained overnight to concentrate the texture. Ferrara Bakery and Veniero's competed fiercely for the title of best cannoli in Manhattan, and mob families had fierce opinions about which was superior. A single cannolo cost 10 cents in 1925. A dozen ordered for a Sunday dinner or a holiday cost $1 plus a small tip to whoever fetched them. The Godfather scene with Clemenza carrying cannoli home to his wife after a hit was not a Hollywood invention. It was based on absolute fact. Mob men brought cannoli home the way civilians brought flowers, to smooth over absences, celebrate victories, or mark a peace. Every mafia wedding, baptism, first communion, and funeral featured a pyramid of cannoli at the center of the dessert table. No other food so completely defined the culture. When Lucky Luciano was exiled to Italy in 1946, the one food he asked visitors from America to bring him was a box of cannoli from Mulberry Street, packed in ice and flown across the Atlantic. He said nothing in Italy tasted the same. So here's the truth. These 30 foods weren't just meals. They were the daily language of a culture that operated outside the law, but inside a code older than any government. Every simmered sauce, every hand-rolled meatball, every cannoli carried home in wax paper was a small act of loyalty, a reminder of where these men came from and what they believed. Which one surprised you most? Drop it in the comments. And if your family has a Sunday gravy recipe that goes back 3 generations, I want to hear about it. Because the real history of the American underworld wasn't written in courthouse records or FBI files. It was written in the pots and pans of kitchens, from Mulberry Street to Bath Beach, one simmering afternoon at a time.